I heard a term recently, a phrase I had never heard before, never even conceptualized before. Game of the decade. How does one even begin to decide which video game deserves this title? This decade in particular was chock full to the brim with not only exceptional video games, but innovative ones too. Video games have achieved feats and numbers not thought previously possible. Well, I think it's about time someone finally tackled the big question. What is the best video game of the decade? Yep, that's right. I'm the first person to do it. No one else. No one else has done this yet. I'm the first one. So, quick answer, gut reaction without thinking too hard about it, Breath of the Wild. That is the first game that comes to mind when I think to myself, what was the best video game to come out of the last 10 years? It was fun, it was smart, it was Zelda for a new age, Zelda for a new system, and I keep finding myself coming back to it and continuing to play it even now, years after its release. So there you have it. If you want to stop watching now, go for it. But I implore you to stick around as I discuss exactly what should go into a game of the decade, and if Breath of the Wild indeed gets the prize. And whatever game does win, I'm going to do another video all about it. So look out for that in the coming months. Real quick, before I go on any further, all the decisions I make in this video, and for this list, and the ultimate decision that I make for Game of the Decade, is my opinion and mine alone. And you know what that means. It means that I'm right and there's no disputing it, so if someone else comes up with a different answer, you tell them no when you send them this video. So speaking of gut reactions, you already know mine, but let's see what other people said. Chris, gut reaction, don't you think about it, what's the Game of the Decade?
Get back to me.
Gut reaction.
I don't know.
Top of your head.
I can't think.
First thought.
Mario Odyssey.
Ethan, my brother, gut reaction, Game of the Decade.
Cookie Clicker.
All right, Dad. Gut reaction without thinking about it too hard. Game of the Decade.
Breath of the Wild.
Hey, Ethan, you want to try again?
You're asking what the game of the year is?
Game of the Decade.
In a decade.
Gut reaction, don't think about it.
Luigi's Mansion.
All right, Pauline.
Yes.
Gut reaction. First thing that comes to your head when I say, what do you think is the best video game of the decade?
Oh, shoot.
Gut reaction.
Kingdom Hearts 3.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Do it again.
Fallout New Vegas.
All really great answers. Any one of those could easily take the crown. So the first step in determining Game of the Decade was to look at a list of every single major release over the past 10 years. And from this, pick out any games I knew I liked or other people liked, and any game that I think has its hat in the running for Game of the Decade. This list consists of roughly a little over 5,300 games, with a large portion of those being re-releases, ports, or remakes. More about those later. Here are a couple guidelines I tried to abide by when choosing the games for this list. Number 1, no personal bias. Listen, just because I loved Tatsunoko vs. Capcom doesn't mean everyone else did. Number 2, no remakes. And number 3, no obvious potential losers. I'm not going to add Red Dead Redemption to the list, knowing well enough that Red Dead Redemption 2 came out in the same decade. Red Dead Redemption 2 is for all intensive purposes the same exact game as Red Dead Redemption, just better in every regard. I realized late into the choosing process that my no remakes rule was a little too close-minded, so I carefully decided which remakes qualified and which didn't. For example, Shadow of the Colossus for the PS4 didn't qualify, because that game is a shot-for-shot, moment-to-moment redo of the original game, just with prettier graphics. But Resident Evil 2, on the other hand, did qualify because of how it went above and beyond to make a wholly new experience. If you looked at screenshots from both Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2, you wouldn't be wrong in assuming that they are from entirely different games. This left me with a list of 159 games to sift through. Here it is, scrolling up the screen. From there, I looked at each year's list one at a time and carefully took each and every game into consideration, asking myself, could this game win Game of the Decade? This next list has 10 games on it, one to represent each year of the decade. To determine this list, I gave myself 5 guidelines to think about before considering each game. Number 1. It must be a game that controls well and feels immersive to play. This doesn't necessarily mean a super realistic game, just one that engrosses you in the world it's trying to offer. Number 2, a game with engaging gameplay that you can't put down. A game you could easily waste a whole day playing without realizing it. Number 3, a game that innovates in its given genre or series. This one's pretty simple. Was this game fresh and entertaining, or was it just another Minecraft clone or the same Assassin's Creed game but a 5th time? Number 4, if it's a sequel or follow-up, it has to be a game that improves upon the one that came before it in every single way. Notice games like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and New Super Mario Bros. U not on the list. And lastly, number 5, if the game received harsh criticism, it is exempt. Batman Arkham Knight is a great game. Now, not so much at launch though. With these in mind, I went back to the drawing board and came up with 10 finalists. But this video's been going on for long enough, so rather than explain in great detail why I picked each one, I'm going to explain why I picked each one in 10 words or less. Assassin's Creed at its beginning and at its best. Minecraft invented a new genre, and people still play it. Skyrim, but with guns. Just kidding. But seriously, the only first-person shooter nominated, and for good reasons. Rayman is now everything Rayman ever wanted to be. The best NES game that never existed now exists. If there's one RPG you play this year, play Undertale. If there's one RPG you play ever, play Persona 5. The greatest Zelda game, the greatest open world game. Period. Who knew being a dad could be so much fun? Old engine, old game, old characters, entirely new experience. And that's it. But there are some honorable mentions before we get into who the winner is. Portal 2 would have hands down won 2011 if it hadn't been for Minecraft. Portal 2 is incredible, but there's no denying Minecraft's impact on the world. Some of you might notice that no fighting games made the list, and while that is true, there's no denying that some of the greatest fighting games of all time came out during the past decade. 2019 was a pretty contentious year. I really couldn't decide between Resident Evil 2 or Fire Emblem Three Houses for the longest time. Both adhered to every single one of my guidelines to a T, but when it came down to it, between these two games, it came to replayability, with Resident Evil 2 just barely squeaking ahead. Also worth mentioning is 2017. What a year for video games. So many incredible games came out that year. Super Mario Odyssey, Doki Doki Literature Club, Dragon Quest XI, Resident Evil 7, Fortnite, Sonic Mania. The best Sonic game of all time and the best Mario game of all time came out in the same year. It just so happened to also be the year that the best Legend of Zelda game came out. So with that being said, I guess there's nothing else to do except reveal the winner. Who will it be? Will Breath of the Wild still end up on top? Will Minecraft end up winning with its innovative nature and staying power? Or will an underdog like Rayman Legends pull out the victory? Carefully taking every stipulation, every review, every moment in each game and the impact it had on the world of gaming into consideration, the winner of Video Game of the Decade goes to Persona 5. Persona 5 stole my heart, and many other players' hearts in ways we didn't think possible. A game franchise that I would consider to be one of the most unapproachable and non-friendly to new players somehow managed to make a game loved and enjoyed by millions worldwide. Persona 5 at its core is an RPG, which stands for role-playing game. But it's in a subgenre of RPG called JRPG. The J stands for Japanese. You see, RPGs look like this. And JRPGs, more often than not, look like this. A lot of more casual video game players typically wouldn't reach for a JRPG when an RPG is right there. JRPGs are typically considered more unapproachable due to the battle system being too advanced, or the sheer amount of story to take in, or the, well, I didn't play Final Fantasy 1 through 14, so I don't think I'll play the 15th one, thank you. But in my opinion, Persona 5 took these concepts and flipped them on their head. Not only is this game welcoming to newcomers, but also welcoming to people who dislike JRPGs. I implore you, if you like video games even a little, try this game. I think you'll be really surprised by how much you like it. Now, no video game is perfect. Many come close, but none are without flaw or criticism. This game, however, goes above and beyond the other games on the list and delivers an experience well worth going back to, and one that I will always have fond memories of. Which is a sentiment that I could say about the 9 losers as well, but none as prevalent as Persona 5. Sure, the game took me 122 hours to beat. Sure, it gets weird with some of the pronunciations. Sure, it doesn't really do a great job handling the topic of homosexuality. But I feel like all these shortcomings don't really matter when you're talking about a game as good as this one. And I think there's no better game to represent the last 10 years than this one. Video games have evolved, and the Persona series has evolved alongside them, starting out as a pretty niche RPG, and so far concluding as a mainstream AAA video game played by many and loved by all who have played it. I think that's just about all I can say for now. I don't want to get too specific, or I might broach subjects to be brought up in my Persona 5 video coming in the next couple months. So, congratulations to Persona 5, and congratulations to the 9 runner-ups. This decade was a great decade for video games, and the next decade is already off to a great start.